and welcome to Money, Money, Money. I'm Samira Abdi. Now, what normally happens in the course of our lives is that when we start earning in, say, our 20s, the feeling is that we live and earn forever. And therefore, we keep postponing making our investments. In our 30s, there are so many responsibilities that suddenly creep up on you, like you have to get married, you either have to buy or rent your first house, you're likely going to have kids around this time, and expenses are just going through the roof, and that becomes another excuse to actually put investing on the back burner. Finally, when people are relatively settled in their 40s, they actually begin to seriously think about their investments and their portfolio. So what are the common mistakes that you could be making in your 40s if you've actually postponed this to your 40s? And more importantly, how can you avoid them? That's the question that I'm going to be posing to my guest this week, Vishal Kapoor, Regional Head of Wealth Management for South Asia at Standard Chartered Bank. Vishal, thanks very much and welcome back to Money, Money, Money.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I have yet to go. I have a long way before I hit my 40s. I don't know about you. I can see a few white hair. So tell us first, are you going to be speaking from experience?
Yes, partly. Why not?
All right, that's the idea. So tell me first, what is so different about the 40s? I mean, I know I spoke about the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. Is it that dramatically different?
I wouldn't say it's dramatically different. It's built up gradually. But I think the fact is that the 40s represent probably the widest array of financial responsibilities that you'll have. Because it's likely that by now you've taken a mortgage, so you're servicing a mortgage already. You've got children, so therefore you've got to plan for their education and then eventually their marriage. So that's two more goals added. You have to start planning about your own retirement. So it seems like, yes, there are a few years left, but it's still getting closer. And it's possible that you also at this stage have to plan for some amount of security for your parents. So if you look at the range of responsibilities you have in your 40s, it's actually probably the widest that will be.
Yeah. And yet you've only touched the tip of the iceberg, right? But what are the most common mistakes that, people you might have interacted with or your clients have come to you with?
I think let's start from the beginning in a sense, which is, have you actually thought about these responsibilities the way I've just portrayed them?
Yeah.
So the first thing is understanding that, there are different goals at this life stage, and it'll be good to be able to start focusing on each of them differently.
Okay.
Because the investment requirement, the thought required for each of these goals is very different. So to start focusing on a challenge, you've got to first recognize it and say, okay, this is what I'm going for. So start with a plan for each of these is the first thing that we get our clients to focus on.
So you mean like a financial plan, right? So if people haven't yet drafted one, how do they begin to draft one in their 40s? I mean, isn't it too late already for some things like if you don't have insurance, for example, or if you don't have any sort of equity exposure?
It's never too late. So if you've not got something started out, then it's a good time now to get started and really, build it systematically. You touched on insurance, which is a very important thing to look at in your 40s, because if you look at the mortality tables that insurance companies work with, 40s, 45 are the two thresholds in a sense when premium really shoots up. So mid-40s at the latest is definitely the time you've got to stock up on the insurance that you think you'll need for the next 10, 15 years. And incidentally, actually, while it's never too late, actually what you end up paying is still going to be the same as what you would have paid had you bought insurance 10 years earlier. So the premium tables work in a manner where at the 40th year and at the 45th year, they really go up. So if you have viewers who are still in their 30s, I would strongly encourage them, top up on your insurance. But if you haven't, then 45 is the latest. You've got to get yourself as much insurance as you think you'll need by 45.
Yeah, so no underinsurance and yet no overinsurance either.
Overinsurance I'm really yet to come across. The most of the clients that we come across are underinsured, largely because you may underestimate how quickly things like healthcare costs are going to go up. So when you started off, you bought yourself a policy worth maybe 3 lakhs or 5 lakhs of coverage, but by now, if you're hitting your mid-40s, that is not going to be enough. So this is the time to actually top up and go for the cover that you think you'll need when you're 60, not when you need it right now. So that's what you've got to do. There are plans now that help you index to inflation, so that may be a good way out.
Okay, so what about contingency then? Because a lot of the times, I mean, it happens with me also very often, is I tend to dip into my contingency very often, if I might admit. But in your 40s, does it get increasingly dangerous to do so?
Not necessarily, because it's really in contingency. You've got to keep yourself, have liquid cash access for about 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses. So by 40s, of course, your expenses may have expanded. And with an expanded expense, you'll have to keep a bit more. But we may also not want to tilt to the other extreme and keep all our savings in a deposit form which is not earning us too much. So one part of liquid cash access that you have that many of our clients don't really recognize is your limit on a card. Not that we want you to revolve on that, but for an emergency, it's always useful to count that in, because there's no point leaving an extra 3 or 4, 5 lakh rupees in a savings account when actually that's the amount of limit you have accessible through a credit card as well.
Okay. And another thing that I've heard a lot of people mention is that they tend to go a little bit overboard when they're buying their first house or their second house, say in your 40s. Would having a very large EMI be detrimental to having a sound financial plan?
I think the challenge we see most often is one of concentration. So it's likely that many investors or individuals in the 40s have already bought themselves the first house. But through their 40s, their earnings have done well, and their expenses have stabilized. Any previous loans like education, etc., have been paid off. So what we do see is a lot of investors jumping back into real estate. So when they have some investable surplus, they're saying, okay, what's the next house I should buy? And if I've got myself a second one,
therefore I need 2 houses.
I need 2 houses, I need a third one, I need a fourth one. So it just keeps expanding. Now what one is doing, which is not a great idea, is getting overexposed to just that one asset class. And of course it is an emotional buy, the first one, your first house, and you're paying for the EMI. But it's not necessary for you to lock up all your savings or the potential savings you had in an EMI, knowing that real estate is not necessarily the best asset class over long periods of time. So if by your 40s, if you've not got any exposure to equities, I would strongly advise that you sit down with someone who understands equities, understand that asset class, and start getting into it. A gradual investment is a good way forward, but you've got to get your portfolio a bit of equity exposure by 40.
But the main problem that I see is that people invest with whatever they have left over from their expenses, and within the investment pie, they put into equity whatever they have left over from everything else. But that's really something that needs to change. So what we'll do is take a very quick break. We'll come back in a bit, and up next, we'll talk about how people in their 40s should seriously stay away from dipping into their retirement funds. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a bit.